Hey crafty people, welcome back to my channel, and in case you're new here, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. I do paper crafting, card making, junk journaling, and mixed media art. Let's get crafting! So in the last video we left off with 3 ideas for adding a pop of color to sepia and or black and white images. If you didn't see that video, I'll leave a link to it down below. It was the last video I did just before this one. And I've already actually recorded the rest of this video, but I hadn't done an intro because I've done this over a couple of days, and it was in between filming these guys and the first part of this video that I realized that the video was going to be too long, and so I decided to break it into 2 pieces. So we're going to do 2 more ideas for adding a pop of color. So that's a total of 5 ideas. And so if you didn't see the first video, we did Distress Oxide wet stamping technique for these guys. I used liquid pearls to add a pop of color on these, and I used Distress watercolored crayons for these guys. We'll move those out of the way, and now we're going to start on the next idea, which involves using Distress Embossing Glaze and regular embossing powder. Okay, so next up we are going to use embossing powders and embossing glazes. Now, the difference between the Distress Embossing Glaze and most of your embossing powders, which this is like a sparkly one, is that the Distress Embossing Glaze is translucent, whereas your embossing powders are usually opaque. And so for this first one, what I want to do is I want to add the embossing glaze to her wings. So I've got a Distress embossing pen. You could also probably do this with a dauber if you're very careful. But what I'm going to do is basically just use the embossing pen to add ink to her wings, and then I can add the embossing glaze over top, and I'm gonna try and work quickly so it doesn't dry. And you want to have a piece of paper around to dump your embossing glaze over so that you can put the excess back into your container. As you can see, I did not get that very well covered. But that's okay, because we can just go back after we heat it and fill in, which is what we're going to end up doing. So let me heat gun this. Now, you don't want to overheat your embossing powder or glaze, because if you do that, it sinks into the paper. So just watch, and once it starts to change, remove your heat. So yeah, I think we're gonna have to do this in small sections because the stuff dries too quickly otherwise. I also maybe needed to put a little bit more pressure down. I think I got all of that very first round melted, because I'm getting stuff coming up on my pen as I scribble. So I wasn't paying attention with my pen and got some some ink where I don't want it. And so there's embossing powder past where her wing is. So I am just going to take a brush and brush it off. so there we go. And so we've got glossy colored wings, and the sepia tones underneath definitely are impacting the color of the embossing powder because it's translucent. Kind of wanted to do these wings too, although this is taking a little bit longer than I planned. So I may just do that off screen and show you what it looks like at the end so that you don't have to sit and watch the fairly tedious process again. Now, another thing you can do with the embossing glazes is stamp and then emboss. Now, you can either use a clear embossing ink, or if you've got the dye ink or the oxide ink that matches your glaze, it will intensify the color of the glaze. Now if you use an oxide, because that's a mixture of pigment and dye, it'll be more opaque than the embossing glaze with either a clear or a distress ink ink pad for your stamping. That sentence was way harder to get out of my mouth than it should have been. So pretty much, I don't think I have Seedless Preserve in oxide, but if I were to pull out the oxide ink, it would create a little bit more opacity than, without being completely opaque, I don't think, than using the glaze with either a clear embossing ink or the distressed dye ink, because distressed dye ink is also semi-translucent. So let me grab stamps and my MISTI, and we'll stamp some of these wildflowers on. Now the reason I'm using my MISTI is because, especially with clear stamps, your dye ink tends to bead up when you put it on a stamp. So being able to stamp it a couple times helps get you a more solid impression. Leave that there for a second. Open this up. Bring my paper over, because I definitely don't want to pour my any embossing powder over my MISTI with a sticky mat in it. Otherwise, I will end up having embossing glaze stuck to my sticky mat. I'll do that. This out of the way, and all of this, and we'll emboss this guy. I think I got much glaze in the center on that one. We'll do a few more on here. I think I overheated that one, or I just didn't get any glaze on there. I don't think I got any glaze to stick that time, because there is no embossing going on there. All right, see if we can line that up again. Much gentler in my tapping off, and I did it off to the side mostly because I didn't want to waste the time to move this out of the way. I think I'm gonna try something for the next one. I think what we're gonna do is we're going to ink with our distress ink. Lay down the color. Then I'm going to wipe off the stamp come in with my VersaMark, which is the embossing ink I like to use, and ink it with that, because the thing about a clear embossing ink is that it has more open time. Like, it does not dry as quickly as other inks to give you time to do your embossing. So hopefully this one will work better. Oh yeah, I can already tell there's way more embossing powder on that. All right, let's clean the embossing powder off the brush. I'm just making a mess everywhere. Oh yeah, that worked way better. All right, that is the key to doing this. Wipe them off, mostly because I don't want to get the purple ink on my VersaFine pad or VersaMark. Those came out so much better. Definitely want to add a few more because I want to disguise the fact that that guy's like floating off into space, it looks like. Let's stick it back in. I want some here and something here. There's that one using embossing glaze and stamps, and it just gives a nice shimmer and shine and a little bit of color. I also put out a lighter colored one because I kind of wanted to have the comparison of light versus a darker background. So let's do that one really quick, and I'm going to use Kitsch Flamingo, and I'm going to use the dye ink and the embossing powder again to stamp a bunch of flowers. I forgot to clean off the stamps first. Now I got Kitsch Flamingo on my embossing pad. That is very neon-y. I'm hoping the glaze will make it a little less neon. That color much better than the very neon it looked when I stamped it, but still a little more neon pink than I was necessarily going for. I think I just want this stalk, like right about here. So we're going to see if we can manage that. what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ink. And then wipe off the part of the stamp I don't want to stamp. Get ink everywhere. Press down, stop. Go back and do it again. Stamp, and we should be good. And I'll just be careful and pay attention to make sure there isn't stray embossing glaze where I don't want it. Yep, I see it where I don't want it, so I'll come in again with the brush and clear that bit off. And now I can emboss it. There, that one's done. And now let's put this away. I am gonna switch to embossing powder, which I'm just gonna use my VersaMark for because it's opaque, so you're not gonna see the ink below, so it doesn't really matter what ink you use. And we're gonna just do a whole nother round of this. And I will speed this way up since you've seen me do this several times, just so you can see the difference between a translucent and an opaque embossing powder. I did not do a great job stamping those. So we are gonna try that again. We should be good to go because I put it in the corner up there so that we can stamp again. I'm just gonna make sure I get them good and inky this time. You notice you can't see what's behind these guys. So that's the difference between a regular embossing powder, which is opaque, and the Distress Embossing Glaze. Let's do a few more flowers on here. There's that one. And I got one more I pulled out to do embossing with regular embossing powder on, but let me have a bit of a cleanup. Okay, so I've cleaned up, I've switched up my stamps, and we're just gonna do this one real quick, and then we'll be done with the embossing. But this is Shabby Blue, and it's I got it from Stampendous like an eon ago. So it's got like chunky bits in it. Although I don't know that any of the chunky bits actually stayed on. Maybe. We'll see. Let's emboss and see what happens. All right. We are going to stamp again, add more embossing powder, and see if we can get some of those chunky bits to stay. Try to be a little bit more targeted in the application. Still not getting the chunky bits. I think what we're gonna do is add a little along the bottom. To kind of frame the piece out, and that should get us the chunky bits. And what I'm going to do is heat from underneath instead of on top. Don't know how well it's showing up on screen, but so yeah, that's kind of cool. I almost want to do like a couple small blobs like on her skirt. Like, almost like a pinch here, pinch there. All right, fingers crossed, and if it doesn't work or we don't like it, can always just reprint the printable. I don't want to do a little bit more. Like I kind of want some like small little I kind of like how that came out. And I definitely held it a little too close because I charred the back, but that's okay. I'm going to back this with some coffee dyed paper. Because this stuff has like a gold, a chunky white, and then the sparkly blue in it. So it makes for like a really interesting effect when you get like the different, like I like the little blobs of white and gold going on. So there's that one done. I'm gonna have a cleanup, and then we've got one more option for adding a pop of color, and then this video will be done. Okay, so for our last way of adding a pop of color, we are going to use fabric and cheesecloth and lace. Oh my. And this has the benefit of also adding some texture to your piece. Now we're gonna start with this little sweetie, and I am using, this was white and I just dyed it with a little Kitsch Flamingo Distress ink. So yeah, it's a little uneven in its coloring, but that's okay. It adds to the charm. And I'm going to start at the bottom and layer upward. And we're just going to add pieces on her dress. So let me grab my scissors. And I'm going to use Fabri-Tac because it just works a little bit better when gluing lace and fabric in bits than art glitter glue. And I'm not going to be too worried about gluing it all the way down because that just gives it a little bit more movement if it's not glued all the way down. So I'm pretty much just going to do a line at the top of each piece and then go from there. Now that we've gotten to her hand, I'm going to do one piece that goes over here. A little worried I'm not going to have enough of the lace. I thought I had plenty, but I'm a little concerned. Fingers crossed there's enough. There you go. She's got a lovely lace skirt. So that adds a little color and a little texture to this piece. And I like how that came out. I may go back and print her again and like cut out the hand so that I can pop up like the top part of her body so that it sits a little higher than the fabric, but that's gonna take a while to print because my printer's a pain in the neck. So I may do that later. All right, next one. For this one, I pulled out some cheesecloth and I figured we'd do her skirt with some cheesecloth. And then we just do it in kind of strips hanging down. So like, all right, so lengthwise, we're gonna go there. And then what we're gonna do is cut this into pieces, like strips, and glue them on. And then I may just tack a little bit down at the bottom to keep it from like completely rolling up on itself. I'm gonna use a little silicone spatula so that I don't get glue on my fingers, and then I'll trim off the excess when we're done. Managed to put like a thin piece in that section. Adding a second layer to give it some more depth. And to intensify our color. All right, I'm gonna trim it off so that I can turn around and glue these pieces onto the piece. So there we go. That added some color and some nice movement, and it's soft. I'm just looking at this, I'm trying to decide. Part of me thinks I maybe should do a couple pieces up here. And part of me's like, no, don't do it. I'm torn. Here, let's cut off a couple pieces of the cheesecloth, and that way we can see what it looks like. Decide. I think I'm gonna go for it. Fingers crossed I like it once it's glued down. I think I need to put two like tightly curled pieces. One more thing it needs. Little gem to go right there. Yeah, I like that. We're gonna call that one done. And then our last one is this one. And this is some fabric scraps. So what I wanna do is I'm gonna put this down at the very bottom. That's got a bit of a hard crease in it, so we're just gonna glue it down so it stays like so. Then we're gonna do a row of this. Just gonna do a thin row of this, I think. We're gonna go there. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run the glue on here and add the layer. And then we can trim away the excess. This will be our next layer. And again, I think I'm gonna just run the glue on and then trim. And I'm doing this and I'm realizing the thing I wanted to do for the next one is gonna be really hard having done this. Yeah, because I wanted to give it the pleating that this piece has, and I was going to use, we are going to hold that in place, lift this section up and trim. Actually, you know what? Here's what we're gonna do. We are gonna grab a pencil. You're gonna sketch in the line of the skirt there, line of the skirt over here, and then what I want to do is, it had scooch it down a little because we'll add another piece up top. Drawing in the shape, which isn't going to be exactly right, but that's mostly because of the shape of the piece of fabric I'm using. Meant to do was trace the pattern of the skirt from the photo onto this piece of fabric before I glued the other layers down, but I forgot to. That will go there. Oh, and she's got hands. Hardly see what I just sketched there, so hopefully we're not going to mess this up, and if I do, I'll just have to find another scrap piece of paper or scrap piece of fabric. It's not too terrible. I just need to take a little bit more out. I think that's good enough. So what we're going to do is glue down the top bit. Glue that on. Oh, look, it's completely off the mark. There we go. Not sure how that went so horribly wrong. I got so off kilter. All right, we are gonna, because we have the ability to lift that up because it's not glued down all the way, we're gonna glue this piece down. We're gonna grab another scrap over here and glue it down over here. And then what I'll do is add a little glue to that spot. And there we go. And we're gonna add another layer. Trying to decide which color I want to go with. That one or the darker. I kind of like the darker because I'm also thinking I'm going to finish it off with, actually, that might work. All right, and we're going to do this in a couple layers so that we can get the effect of like her bell sleeves, kind of. So we're going to add that piece on. Yeah, this is definitely a little fiddlier than I thought it was going to be, but that's all right. That needs to get glued down because it's bugging me. I feel like it needs something else up here. Like it's just too plain. Can I squeeze something underneath these guys? And I think the answer is yes. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut a piece of fabric to a point. See how that fits. Does that fit? That point does not. I kind of feel like it needs 2 points. So yeah, not exactly how I had planned. Do that. And then maybe that. And just pull this up enough to glue them under. Got to get that to come back down. And we'll put a little bit more glue. Ooh. Under here. Yeah, I think I like that. I think I like that look. The layered raggedy, and I'm gonna have to glue that down because I pushed it up so much, so it's like, I just want to stay here now. So we'll just put a little glue to get that down. So there you go. We've got 3 ways of adding a pop of color with fabric. Okay, so I did off camera go ahead and do the embossing glaze on her, and I think I had planned on using salvage patina, put stuff away, went away, worked, came back, started working on this again, and grabbed the peacock feathers out of the thing. So I did peacock feathers instead of salvage patina, and I really like how it came out on that. Okay, so we did 2 more ideas for how to add a pop of color to your sepia or black and white images. We did we did embossing powders, which are opaque, and we did embossing glaze, which is translucent, and we did stamping and just writing on with the pen, and then that was the one I did off camera because that one took a really long time. So we got those, and then we added a pop of color by adding colored fabric onto our pieces. So we've got her, and we've got her. And then in the last video, we did liquid pearls, the Distress Oxide wet stamping technique, and then Distress watercolor pencils. So with both videos, you've got 5 ideas with a couple variations on a few of the ideas, because we did glazed stamped, glazed where I inked an area and applied the embossing to it, and then we've got the embossing with embossing powder versus embossing glazes. And yeah, so that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting.